Hello, everyone. We are talking today about Cybeats and Veracode integration. I have a pleasure today to have Dmitry, CTO and co-founder of Cybeats, and Johnny, Senior Solution Architect for Veracode. Dmitry, can you please tell me about yourself?
I'm leading the development and the technology for Cybeats SBOM Studio. Cybeats SBOM Studio is product to manage SBOMs and assess software supply chain security risks. I'm happy to be here with you and Johnny and discuss our integration.
Thank you. Johnny, can you please tell us about yourself and the company?
Sure. I'm Johnny Wong, Senior Director of Pre-Sales for North America at Veracode. And Veracode is an application security company, and our goal is to help secure the world's application.
Who wants to explain what's SBOM? We've been hearing the word for a long time, and I think some people confused about what it is and how do you use it.
Sure. So SBOM, stands for Software Bill of Materials, and it's just a list of components, in a package of software. I'd like to always think of it as it's a list of ingredients for a meal, but for software, right? It's everything that makes up a software package, which includes the custom code that a software producer creates, the open source libraries that they include in that package as well, including any kind of third-party closed source libraries. And people wonder, well, why do we care about SBOMs? You should care if you want to minimize risk for yourself and your organization, because it really touches everybody, right? Anybody who writes software, anybody who buys or operates software should care about what makes up their software packages.
I'm wondering, you mentioned food, and in a way, I think we all moved to kind of have a more healthy meals for the last couple of years. So we're more cautious and conscious of what we're eating. Is this similar to packages? We want to make sure that what we deploy is healthy.
Certain folks have allergies or just have sensitivities to certain ingredients, and you absolutely want to understand what goes into your food so you don't have any trouble. And in the case of software, it could be software vulnerabilities. If you all remember, about a year ago, we had that Log4j incident where a lot of folks did not know what was inside their software and had to scramble to find out before they actually went and fixed it. And then there's also licensing risk as well, where whatever I'm bringing in, does that affect my company, from a distribution perspective?
Makes sense. I understand what SBOM mean, but how to actually generate an SBOM?
Sure. So from a Veracode perspective, we scan applications for vulnerabilities and license risk information. We scan the entire application. But with respect to SBOM, we have our software composition analysis solution, which looks at the included open source components within those particular applications. We scan it, we understand what is contained within that particular application, and then we enrich it with data around vulnerabilities as well as license risk information. And that's exported out in standard SBOM formats, Cyclone DX, which then can be consumed by SBOM Studio.
Dmitry, can you add anything to the idea of what your perspective on this?
There are multiple places where we can generate SBOMs. One of them is actually using the code itself from the repository. The other place is the build time. That's a place to capture a very precise and very accurate SBOM of our software or a product. And eventually we also can generate SBOM at the release or post the release using the compiled code and utilizing technologies like binary analysis. It's definitely better to generate SBOM for every single build, and then pick and choose the SBOM that we would like to promote as the one that will be released, together with our release candidates and the software that actually released to production.
Is there such thing as a bad SBOM or good SBOM?
The worst SBOM is one that's not even generated. I think given the supply chain risks that we have today around zero-day events, and especially now the new government emphasis on providing SBOMs for doing business with the government as well as each other, you can't not have an SBOM these days.
There might be different type of problems that you can face, such as misalignment with specs, incorrect hierarchy, different type of SBOM elements made incorrectly. As example, if I'm trying to represent a package and I would call it a library or I'll call it file, this would be example of incorrect presentation. So definitely there are different SBOMs, and of course, some SBOMs will have more data, as example, Veracode.
It's not just having a bill of materials, but having additional meta information around things like the libraries are using, the transitive libraries, as well as vulnerability information, license risk information. And just from a Veracode perspective, not only do we have the vulnerability information from the National Vulnerability Database, which is typically the standard for vulnerability data, but we also have a proprietary database that is 1.5 times larger than the National Vulnerability Database.
You mentioned about vulnerabilities. If I take the two solutions together, how do I actually remediate using both solutions?
From Veracode's data set, we provide not only just the bill of materials, but additional metadata around the vulnerabilities in our SBOMs. And we provide that particular information to SBOM Studio, and then they enrich it with more information, and then ultimately comes back to Veracode for remediation with that additional information.
After the SBOM is generated by Veracode, it's automatically imported to SBOM Studio, where it's first analyzed for completeness. Then it's going through correction algorithms that verify the data integrity and hierarchy, and that CycloneDX or SPDX specs are respected. The next stage is separating the SBOM to the various components of software dependencies, something that resembles a centrifuge operation. In the end, we have the original SBOM stored as is, and all the metadata created from it that represents SBOM entities and their relationships. At the end of the process, all the software components are processed through Cybeats data enrichment with our unique technology of deep package inspection, and apply our supply chain intelligence data on top of it, while deriving the risk category of the whole product. Once this process is complete, SBOM Studio starts monitoring continuously the SBOM software components and their dependencies for existing and new risks. When new risks are detected, SBOM Studio will provide very detailed information and will allow the user to link back to Veracode platform for remediation guidance.
You guys mentioned multiple times about continued generation of SBOMs. So from your knowledge and experience, how many SBOMs a typical company may have?
Evgeny, that's an excellent question. Let's take a top-to-bottom approach. If you look at modern software development corporates, we will find out that they consist of multiple business units. These business units consist of multiple teams. These teams are maintaining multiple products. These products might be devices, might be web services, might be applications. Let's take as an example a microservice. A microservice will be built out of a container. This container will include the microservice application that, depending on multiple open source package. But it's not just our code or open source we need to manage. Microservice also might be depending on third party. It might be a library, it might be a graphic application, it's a software being developed by someone else. Let's also not forget the modern CI/CD pipeline and the DevOps culture of the organization. Based on that, we can find that software being built tens or sometimes hundreds of times a day. Every single build will produce an SBOM. This is a very big problem to solve. And at very, very big scale. Evgeny, I hope it answers the question.
This sounds like a recipe for disaster. If I generate a lot of SBOMs, how do I manage them?
So first of all, we need to store all of these tens of thousands of SBOMs that we're generating somewhere. We, of course, can use some network drive, S3 bucket, we can use Git in some cases, we can use artifact repositories, file storage, that's not a problem. That's a problem that's already solved. The question, how we really managing SBOMs. And let's think about what kind of capabilities we are going to need for the management. When we sharing the SBOMs, and we'll have to share them with our customers, with regulatory bodies, with certification authorities, with auditors in some cases. We want to share the SBOM that describes the whole product that we're providing to our customer. Eventually, there is no product today that just built from one simple software or one simple application. Usually, it's a combination of multiple microservices, of multiple libraries, of operating system, of framework. So you can sense the complexity here, right? Because different components of the product might be built by different teams, different business units. We will have to be able to stitch and glue together multiple smaller SBOMs into bigger Uber SBOM that represents our product. And that's the basic need of SBOM management platform. The other capabilities we want to have as part of managing SBOMs is the ability to say at any given moment where and what component is being used. So next time when we're hearing about a company that's hit by ransomware attack, experiencing supply chain attack, or maybe the next Log4j, we want to be able immediately map and see how it affects on our products, on our software, and even going further for our customers that have been affected.
So Veracode generate SBOMs, then they go to Cybeats. Can you describe the architecture maybe more in depth, how it's actually working?
Yeah, so it really to generate that SBOM really starts with Veracode, and we're embedded into the SDLC. So as our customers are building their applications, we're right there, scanning their applications, both from a first party custom code perspective, as well as giving them an understanding of all the open source third party libraries that they bring in, and also any transitive libraries that they bring in too. So as part of that scan, we have a wealth of data that comes with it. Not only just have the bill of materials, but also vulnerability information, as I mentioned earlier about our premium database. And as part of that scanning activity, we just generate an SBOM in Cyclone DX format, and it's readily available to be consumed by Cybeats SBOM Studio.
Once it's consumed by Cybeats SBOM Studio, it's been stored. And if there is any other sources of SBOMs, such as third-party components we're working with, these SBOMs also can be stored in Cybeats SBOM Studio. And then we can combine these SBOMs in the bigger SBOM representing a product. And of course, we can share them through Cybeats SBOM Studio with our downstream customers. Then we're providing some dashboard that actually gives you one single pane of glass to look at all of your SBOMs, regardless of their origin.
Can you talk a bit more about the business value of SBOM management?
Sure, I can take that one. And in terms of business value, every time I think of SBOMs, I think of this quote: "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." With SBOMs, it opens up a whole new world of transparency that will help everyone. Right? Anyone who uses software, whether it's buyers and operators who want to understand the security risk of a solution that they're purchasing and using, they could actually use it as another metric in terms of evaluating what to buy, with their money. So in turn, software producers have to increase the priority of embedding security into the development processes and using security as a differentiator in the marketplace. So they have to be more proactive in updating, risky libraries that has vulnerabilities, or, updating outdated libraries, because now everyone can see they're using, some library that was built 20 years ago and may or may not be maintained today. And that includes whether it's open source authors or closed systems, commercial off-the-shelf systems, and so on, right? So it's basically, it raises the tide for everybody involved and just makes the world a more safer place if you're using software. And that is pretty much everybody in the world today.
What can you recommend to a customer that decided it's about time to generate SBOMs?
Well, I think number one, if you're not doing it today, you should be doing it in some elementary fashion. To Dmitry's point earlier about companies requiring it, there is that just about a year ago, the cybersecurity executive order from President Biden, that there was many things discussed in that order, but one of them is having a software bill of materials from any vendor that wants to do business with the government. So you have that, and that will be adopted by private sector because they want to do business. They want to sell to the government as well. And like I said, talked about before, rising tides, it'll help everyone out. So number one, have that. It's not a nice to have anymore. It's not a we'll generate it when something happens, like another 0 day. It's a we have to do it today. And going back to my comment about consistency, find a vendor that is able to help you generate it in your SDLC, whether it's code, whether it's build, whether it's release, and then having a central management system to make sure you pull in all the SBOMs from your software, from your firmware, wherever you need to, from your supply chain perspective, and manage that.
So the metrics in this case will be my asset management, all the software I have, and then I generate all the SBOMs for them.
Right. And then put that in a central repository to manage it.
Eventually, all of these software SBOMs, they represent software assets. If you look at kind of a maturity model of SBOM, if you're looking 3 to 5 years ahead, what you would really want to do is actually, in case of an attack, in case of some common vulnerability that's been discovered, you very quickly not just resolving which software affected, but also where the software is running and executing.
Dmitry, Johnny, thank you very much. Thank you for Cybeats. Thank you for Veracode. A lot of good information here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evgeny.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.